All right, I am republishing my poetry epic, Archai, a cosmogonic epic, which is a collection of poetry that I wrote in the early part of 2017. 2017 was a really busy year for me. It was very prolific. I may have published 6 or 7 books total that year, 1 novel, 4 collections of poetry, 4 or 5, I've lost count, but I'm going back and republishing each one of them in a larger size format, and they're all in hardcover. The paperbacks will soon follow. They're all in hardcover, and even better yet, and you guys are going to be blown away by this, what I've discovered that can be done with Google's Gemini AI. It can visualize any image that you want, and it does it better, in my experience, than Meta or any of the other AIs that I've experimented with. And particularly for this book, where science images are difficult to find on Wikimedia Commons that are copyright free. So these are mostly going to be AI images that we're going to be looking at. Quite spectacular. And this is the cover. It's actually the interior on the inside of an antler horn. Very, very close up with some snow on it. But I thought it was the perfect image for a history of the Earth, which is essentially what this is. Now I'm going to read the first 3/4 of this, or maybe 2/3, we'll see. And you guys who are interested, then you can purchase the copies on Amazon. They'll be roughly $49.99 for the hardcover, but it'll be worth every penny, I guarantee it. So let's shift modes here. All right, so let's read this monster, Archai, a cosmogonic epic. This is, I think, the 6th book published by my press, Iconic Books, down here. There'll be quite a few more. My Gilgamesh novel is on the horizon next. And here are the contents. We've got the Earth divided into 5 phases. 5 is a number that's numerologically sacred to Mercury, which you'll learn about when you read Thomas Pynchon's novel Against the Day, which is also broken into 5. It's a number, it's a Mercury number. So we've got 5 because this is a knowledge poetic epic. Part 1 is about magmas. 3 orbs, Hadean basalt and Okeanos, the formation of the ocean, in other words. Part 2, ocean world. Cambrian Genesis, Ordovician Boneyard, Silurian Jawbone, and Devonian Apocalypse. There are a lot of apocalypses as we look back through the history of this planet's, it's been through quite a few traumas. It's amazing that life is still here. Part 3, Canopies, Carboniferous Pastoral, Permian Ruins, Triassic Cosmology, Leviathan and Behemoth, Cretaceous Flood. Part 4 will be the Anthropogeny, Eocene Lakebed, Oligocene Gigantomachy, Australopithecines, Homo habilis, Homo erectus, Modern Homo sapiens 1, Modern Homo sapiens 2, Bison. Part 5, Reticulations, Monumenta, and Cities. All right. This is from the great 20th century poet Paul Celan. Line the word caves with panther skins. Part 1, Magmas. And again, this is the kind of stuff you can do with this Gemini AI. It's not fooling around. 1, 3 orbs. Rocks, burning, glowing, luminous stones in the cold wastes of dark space, cohering, accreting, colliding, smashing together to form an orb. Thea. Dust debris chaos. Rocks splayed open. A fine smear of vanilla red cinnabar, blown out into space, from out of the ribcage of its mother, rising livid over the horizon in the black ruins of shattered space, a swollen, glowing, living, molten thing, Erda and her pale newborn child, the burning moon. 2, Hadean basalt, magmas, and sulfurous silicates. The moon lit with volcanic fountains of luminous, wasted orange light, and its mother, the earth, a glowing ball of churning liquid rock, epidermal cooling on a cracked olivine skin, mild green upon the melting crust, and on the moon, anorthite crystals, congealing out of the black slag heap above the raging earth furnace below. Dunite pyroxene crystals crushed and compacted into a black basalt exoskeleton, a spiny earth riven with glowing red fissures orbited by an ivory ball of fire and shattering towers of silicate foam. In the deep core of liquid iron, a magnetosphere worn like a shield against Helios. Basalt skin protecting an iron core mantled in magnets, a living giant in the wasted rubble junk heap of space. Magnets mantling magma. And there's the ocean coming into being there. it's the late heavy bombardment at the end of the first epoch, the Hadean epoch, about 4.6 billion years ago, something like that. And these meteorites brought frozen ice crystals with them. And as they hit the fiery volcanic Earth, it melted and gradually formed the ocean, which is what Chapter 2 is about, Okeanos. 3. Okeanos. A pause in the bare stellar silence, and then it comes. A rain of meteorites bearing frozen ice crystals that plunge, topple, and drop out of the Gaussian night. Scorching flares inscribing white lines into the black slate of an obsidian sky, hurtling, crashing into the red-black orb. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, just like that. Too many to count. And then dissolving into the blue heat of Erda's anatomy, ice crystals melting into silvery pools of black night on the dried outer shell of its cooling lucence. Pools and then lakes, seas that fuse into one vast dirt-brown ocean beneath a sky the color of rust. This was what the Greeks meant when they spoke of baneful night and strife and nemesis of the gods and the elements, forms of chaos in making, too ancient for human memory, but still felt in the igneous polish of basalt and granite, which have never forgotten those meteorites. 4. Granite. Out of the roiling sea's gray-black volcanic cones leak orange-red rivers that hiss into vents of steam as the magma slides into the waters. Poseidon, the earth-shaker, set to work. The Egyptians knew him as Jeb, melting great slabs of basalt into the hot magma beneath and reforging these into chunks of luminous granite that now thrust up to become Erda's first islands. The basalt sank and melted, and as the volcanoes did their work, granite islands clumped together to form the first continents. Sodium, potassium, and water, beryllium, lithium, uranium, zircon, tantalum, quartz, feldspar, mica, and amphiboly that is rich in iron. All these Vulcan smelted in the yellow fiery glow of his smithy, which cast huge shadows upon mountainous walls as he worked, hammering and thundering day and night to form this new granitic rock. Craggy mountains pushed up out of the seas as volcanoes poured cones of gray ash into the murky sunlit distance. Stacked flumes in multiple columns across the haze, cataracts of water lashing about the new mountains and falling as the ground heaved and the earth buckled. Blue-gray cyclopean mountains and islands newborn, gathered in humps and ridges under the light pink rain. 5. Archean foldings. The black night. 1,000 fire arrows launched by hidden army, burning chunks. Rock that came searing into oceans, bringing with them tiny incunabuli, proteins, carbons, amino acids, sank into the ocean floor where they multiplied, transformed by the high pressures and the black murk of the abyssal depths into chemical polymers that writhed and spun, tiny snakes that wound and unwound, coiling and folding into strands of RNA, hatched inside eggs of hollow lipid spheres that burst asunder and multiplied through the dark seas. With translucent strands of bioplasmic chemicals, life taught itself to read and remember, with nucleotide libraries, basic texts for autoreplication and reproduction of frenzied forms. Long, thin, tubular strands, round, ragged, and haggard spheres, ovoid pods inside black vents that bled chemical rivers from the hot sea depths, microbeings that stripped chemicals from subterranean rocks and pumped methane into the atmosphere in huge, invisible, ascending clouds out of the seas in the sun-soaked shallows, where the arc of the sea met the curvature of the land. Mud brick towers were rising, built by a new creature, blue-green microtubules, hungry for sunlight, round towers soaking the air with oxygen, stacked row upon row, and painting the dirt-red sky a deep cerulean blue. Ages passed, and then a chill stiffened the earth, for oxygen eats methane and shears the earth of its gas dome. Glaciers awakened, huge advancing walls of cream-colored frozen slabs, punctured by the dim and distant oil well flares of volcanoes that ruptured the ice and filled the air with plumes of ash and cinder smoke that mixed with white haze and settled over a frigid and solemn silence. 6. Proterozoic red and green. A dark maroon ball, bleeding at the edge of the horizon into a vast white plain of ice, black volcanic cones spewing cylinders of smoke and ash at the edges of the earth, the weight of vanilla slabs upon cracked ground, the oxygenated air transforming molecules of iron that paint the rocks rust red, lime-green tidal pools and blue-white sea shallows, pink lakes with frosted azure depths, chalky cliffs and limestone caves, the unfolding, unflagging earth thawing. And with that thaw, new cells erupting out of the bioplasmic pools of chemical infinitude, spindle-shaped, tubular, round, ovoid, elliptical, and mottled, cannibals, slicing into each other with chemical knives, puncturing translucent lipid membranes to feed on genetic fluids. The problem was viruses, with long spidery legs and tiny geodesic thoraxes, spindly blue octagons and floating tubular capsules, pink pods with geometric cores and gap-toothed sheaths full of erratic, wayward genes. Inside the cells, lipid walls burst out of unfathomable darknesses to ensheathe long genetic polymers in protective microspheres. And then the cells with macronoiac thought clumped together with collagen and began to weave huge microbial mats into cracked pale green tiles, with sulfurous yellow runnels between them crawling over the barren earth, bacterial cities, horizontal this time, that the viruses could no longer reach. Other cells, meanwhile, stacking like discs on the bottom of gold-flecked seas into red polyp stalks that grew with branches interwoven to form vast cellular carpets, causing inland seas to bleed at the edges of their foamy serrated shores. Red algae. The Spartan rocks no longer bare, but painted red and green with microbial mats and algal rafts, warring to lay waste to the sun, with which to build their zoophytic organs that sloshed through translucent bioluminescent membranes, and the rich warm air once again began to crumple and deflate like the ruinous sack of a depleted shell. Urda heaved and ruptured, continents colliding and forcing up ragged mountains like wedges out of wet mud, coppery-colored runoff in streams and vast canyons forming new minerals, azurite and cinnabar, beryllium and cobalt, bursting out of hidden recesses in the dark earth. Rodinia collapsed, the broken earth rending in jagged gashes that opened up shining lagoons, mirroring scattered pieces of gold skies with swirling clouds, bringing crumbly gray rain that weathered the rocks, drawing down the carbon dioxide. And at the poles, the slumbering glaciers were awakened once more, but this time they slid across Urda's crust all the way to the equator, where they met in a rippling white seam that sealed off the planet in a frozen cocoon of ice. Upon the stiff ball of Urda, nothing moved any longer, and the only sound that could be heard, if anyone had been there to hear it, was the rumbling of its volcanoes beneath the plains of sun-frosted ice. Part 2. Ocean World. Cambrian Genesis, Chapter 7. The glaciers withdrew, leaving a mud-washed torpor of coffee-brown rivers mired in slush, sunken lakes ringed with bogs, sodden gray skies, and copper-flecked waves upon ancient foaming seas. Beneath the waves, as though the ice dome around the earth had been a kind of planetary mold that, once broken, left behind a residue of living forms, a microbestiary of tiny, thumb-sized animals, imprinted onto the seafloor mud, composing a proto-zodiac of animal archai, enabling us to precess through them in circular succession as follows. Anomalocaris canadensis, at 3 feet long, by far the largest of these creatures, a sort of mottled pink submarine with pulpy eyes on stalks and 2 fan-shaped appendages with serrated teeth that it used for gobbling trilobites like candy. And there it is here at the top, a 3 foot long. It's basically the T-Rex here at the top of the food chain. Protohartsina, an eyeless worm that with razored calcium phosphate daggers for teeth. Atoya prolifica, another long segmented worm with a retractable pink proboscis that lay in wait in the spongy seabed to ambush its prey. Archai pedunculata. That one's a tough one. Archai pedunculata, a worm-like creature in 10 segments walking on spiked, annulated legs with a pair of tiny arms flanking an open mouth ringed by 6 spikes. 6 spikes of legs that resembled pink tentacles, a smooth eyeless head raised to guide its wayward path through the darkness. Hallucigenia sparsa, an arthropod walking on 7 pairs of bent stilts, its back festooned with twin rows of spikes like a living cactus. Opabinia regalis, a thumb-sized variation on Anomalocaris, a segmented creature with gills and 5 eyes on stalks, bearing a single ropey proboscis extending below its mouth and terminating in a claw lined with glittering silicate teeth. Marella splendens, a crab-shrimp prototype with 8 pairs of articulated legs and a strange starfish-shaped head that enabled it to flit about the sea floor. Wiwaxia corrugata, an ovoid mollusk enclosed within a shell covered by layers of 50 woven sclerites and armored with dorsal spines sticking straight up into the air. Pikaia graecilens, the world's oldest fish, a worm flattened sideways with a notochord spine propelling it with sinuous eel-like motion through the blue depths. Hycuichthys, a chordate fish bearing the illuminated anatomy of a transparent zoomorph with the rudiments of a spine, internal organs that luminesced in the dark, a dorsal fin filigreeing its back with faint gold light, and 9 gill slits carved into its side. Miliconmingia fungjawa, a tiny jawless fish with a cartilaginous skull, 5 or 6 gill slits, and a triangular dorsal fin. The dark corners of the earth had borne these creatures from an earlier generation of flat pink sand dollar animals, worms, sponges, and jellyfish, a lazy and emotionless eon largely given to stasis, transformed and bioilluminated through contact with the newly minted minerals unleashed by the collapse of Rodinia. These archaic fauna learned to endometabolize calcium carbonate, phosphorus, and silicates, somewhere along the shales and limestone gradients of the ragged, heaving sea floor, building the minerals into their soft pink anatomies and armoring themselves with the world's first teeth, claws, eyes, and exoskeletons. Hence, from the ocean's deepest abysses, these flat, round worms and sand dollars exploded across the sea-green floors to unleash upon each other a drum of teeth, spines, claws, and blood on the countless bottoms of 1,000 sunlit seas. 8. Ordovician Boneyard. A leaking, watery blue giant scarred and mutilated by advancing glaciers and the pitiless, distant gaze of an already exhausted sun that watched over all with filmy unconcern. Even the junk-heap rubble of a calcium carbonate boneyard could not move it to anything but a blithe and stolid indifference lining the shores of a limpid green pool with white silicate swirls. All that remained of a shrinking tidal canyon. Here lay beached bryozoans with cracked pink shells, scattered amongst the rotting bodies of 1,000 trilobites and star-shaped echinoderms gone wasted and limp, the tiny serrated tubes of graptolites littering the shattered wrecks of mottled yellow sea scorpions, and the dried-out remains of bivalves and gastropods, carefully designed to follow the lean mathematical trajectories of the Fibonacci spiral. The bloated purple bodies of 3 arandaspids, jawless fish, the size of a human hand, with bony plates encasing their skulls, no fins, and a single tail to propel their lumberous bodies through the ancient deeps. Even the enormous 20-foot cone of a cephalopod with rubbery pink tentacles gone stiff in the dry air as a nacreous film of clouds passed over the sun at that moment. Endocirrus, the great predator of a child's bestiary, tiny, palm-sized animals. Even Endocirrus had been left to ruin and waste by the vanishing seas, for here evolution has died, as the glacial behemoths cut new runnels into the starved and lacklorn earth, soaking up the dying seas with all their zooquatic victims. Though it is true that to a discerning eye overlooking such a boneyard, the red and black millipede that has crawled from the green ruins of the tidal pool and is presently making its way across the orange sand towards some unknown goal upon a hostile and as yet uninhabited land might suggest otherwise. Keep your eye on the fact that the fish do not have jaws, and that millipede. And here is Endocirrus, the great T-Rex at the top of this particular food chain, gobbling up jawless fish. And there goes the millipedes. That is amazing what AI can do. All I did was tell it to imagine some millipedes crawling during the Silurian epoch out of the ocean onto a land where there's little tiny plants. Silurian jawbone, 9. Ocean world, blue disk, gold dome, round red hills, greened with algae. Orion slid up out of the depths, hung on the black canopy of ancient night, an enormous glowing giant, and then plunged into the dark oceanic pit on the other side of the world, while across the ragged heavens Scorpio climbed out of Hades to pursue him. Gaia had sent the scorpion that killed Orion, and it was her brood now that ruled the seas, for its aquamarine depths swarmed with giant 3-foot scorpions and the black conical cylinders of enormous cephalopods that went floating backwards to catch their prey. Millipedes crawled from azurite pools onto the cracked brown earth, where they shuttled through thin tubular forests of rhiniophytes, recently migrated from the waters that had learned to build lignin against gravity. The mottled yellow hulks of the scorpions followed them, for they had lungs as well as gills, and punctured the millipedes with their stingers to strip chunks of ivory meat from their long enameled shells, while the soft pink sun leaked across ocean world with red rainy lines. Gaian giants ruled the earth, but the children of Poseidon, who had taken his forked trident into the fish-white meat of their bodies and wrapped their cells around it until the fork sprouted a skull, remained small enough for the palm and cloned mass multiples of themselves to survive in the green darkness. Ichthyan swarms, tiny bioluminescent hycoichthyes, shellless, jawless, changed into bulbous, bone-shelled aerondaspids with frozen O-shaped mouths, and aerondaspids into anvil-headed cephalaspids, a bottom-feeding fish with a head so heavy that it could not outpace the brontoscorpios pursuing it. But the fish remembered Poseidon's weapon and called it forth, shifting a gill arch forward with Stygian power and lining it with scalloped edges to become the first jawbone, while out of the translucent darkness, squirming eggs hatching spawned hordes of new fish, lobe-finned Saurolepis and shark-finned Climatius and ray-finned Andriolepis, armored with sharpened jaws. If Samson had slain 1,000 Philistines with the jawbone of an ass, then these new creatures would set forth, using their calcium saw blades, to rend and rip and tear in vast multiplicitous hordes 1,000 new animals, including the arthropods. For in time, their tiny blue-gray bodies would heave and buckle with the new forces, skeletons bursting asunder with raw cellular power as they expanded and rebuilt to fill the seas and the coffee-colored earth with teeth. The invention of the jaw was a game-changer for the vertebrates in the struggle between, in the whole history of evolution, you'll see as we go through this book, the main theme is the struggle between vertebrates on the one hand and exoskeletal creatures on the other, which is why I believe we have an instinctive dislike and fear of insects. Our bodies know and remember the history of what the struggle was like. And now that they have the jawbone, they can produce monstrosities like this Dunkleosteus, who is now, the vertebrate is now at the top of the food chain. Notice that. 10. Devonian Apocalypse. Urda split open, wounds of hot magma, red earth metals, gold, silver, chromium seas, magnesium magenta twilight, glowing seams of incandescent dirt, tiny translucent spheres of eggs raining through inky oceans with little shriveled mummies inside them instead of fish. Dunkleosteus, yawning jaws opening in the deep to swallow a eurypterid, while chunks of glowing magma scorched the seas around it. Broken cephalopods with writhing tentacles cruised past swales of ocean floor caved in. Carbon dioxide-stained skies above ruined anoxic seas the color of burnt rust. And there it is, the Devonian Apocalypse, the biggest one in Earth's history up to this point, a rival to the Permo-Triassic extinction event. Shoals of green-gray Caucasteus, like swarms of Luftwaffe over British skies, darken the seas as riven seams of liquid rock glow pink and clouds of chunky black smoke burn from seafloor vents, archaic crematoria. Panderichthys guards its seared eggs, pink gone into black near a crushed and maligned reef as a horde of panicked Eusthenopterons flows liquidly past. An armor-plated river of green bony cells foamed into fish beings with glowing silver incandescence. A Stethecanthus shark, trailing a cloud of blood, sinks past like a downed Stuka fighter pilot as a gang of hungry Bothriolepis pursue it, gobbling up the blood with greedy sucker mouths, and the earth heaves and buckles all around them, cheering them on in a fitful display of spiny discontent. If you could float above the waters looking down, you would see a dark rain of ash and cinder smoke, with blue-green seams on fire, the ocean burning, and the distant tree line a set of hot yellow coals. As night falls, the earth is lit up in dim and distant flame roses that burn lovely in sulphurous dark plumes of chaos through the night. Ragged lines of fire cross each other in flames over the forests, as enormous black fountains of smoke sever the hinge of earth from its mooring in the heavens. At the edge of the world, the night is illuminate with 1,001 burning oil wells, making murky clumps of distillate chaos and wasted skeletons seeding the oceans with corpses of burning fish on fire off the crushed seashores. A roasting Dunkleosteus floats by, while a trapped group of Ichthyans and lampreys tunnel frantically to get at the corpse's meat before it expires. An entire group of Tiktaalics passes, drifting on their backs, tiny blue flames still flickering all over them, lobe legs splayed with cracked bones open to the air, an algal raft full of burning placodermic fish skulls, alight like altars, bobs up and down on the cream-colored waves. A fallen tree full of orange crabs busy dismantling the wasted carcass of a blue shark can be spotted, if you know how to look. Through this spiny wreckage of a ruined eon, it is the time of last things, which has set upon this generation a judgment of death and darkness, so severe that the earth will not see the sun again, but deep within the black, ruinous wastes of the ocean waters, a fish called Mater Pisces drops from her belly another smaller version of herself into the waters beneath, and the tiny eggless armored fish, as though astonished at its birth, darts abruptly forth into the darkest smoke clouds of the sea in search of what? We do not know. So now we have this fish anyway, inventing live birth without eggs. We're on the way to mammals. 11. Carboniferous pastoral. This is the epoch from whence we get all our fossil fuels from all these trees. An explosion of riotous green shrapnel bursting atop row after row of spindle-thin fern trees, which the broken earth has shoved up with vertebral force at the sun to cleave it with chemical arrows. Towering stalks of spiny lepidodendrons flanked by stumpy ferns, ropey crenellated fronds with serrate edges, ancient sigillaria, its bark filigreed with honeycombed hexagons, bamboo-thin calamites with segmented stalks capped by horsetail heads, immense Saronius splayed with palm-like fronds and flanked by mad green armies of low ferns, and medullosan trunks with tiny glittering knife leaves and round pulpy seeds that flourish upon the wasted earth. Here the sun is cut apart into thick slats that razor their way through the foliage and fall into the stagnant swamps in lemon-yellow slices, where they join the mirrored sky and disappear into the murky liquid. Every now and again the algal surface of this lagoon is disturbed by the huge olive skulls of leathery reptiles, which snap their jaws with ivory-yellow teeth at the plague of rampant dragonflies hunting above them, blue and yellow thoraxes, bulbous red hemispheric eyes, and flashing translucent wings, gigantic. They lift tiny pink lizards from the shore and steal away with them among the fronds to feast near the cluttered remains of lizard skulls discarded in the branches from previous meals. One of the dragonflies has been caught in the web of a giant black spider which has it crucified to a tree and is presently working hard to remove its head with its mandibles. Shoals of yellow-black micro-lizards scuttle up the trunk of a nearby club moss, where an army of newly hatched red and green spiders are busy dismantling the carcass of another larger blue lizard, its sides heaving like a bellows with its last gulps of precious air as it lies on its back, viewing the forest upside down while the lifeblood drains out of it and its vision dims. In a brown pool near the lagoon, a nest of eel-like creatures writhes at the edge of the silver shoreline, where a lumbering Ophiocodon with striped scaly skin has crawled up from the depths and chews noisily on the carcass of a giant millipede. The dinosaurs are on the way here, it looks like. Elsewhere, 3 enormous scorpions fight over the poisoned body of a mottled amphibomus, lunging and snapping at each other with articulate shearing claws as the immobilized creature stiffens and dies, and in the blue haze where the curvature of the earth ruptures through the tangled canopy of trees at the line of the horizon, a single lone club moss is alight and blazes quietly in the distance against a riotous and corrupt wall of green that surrounds it. Rivers of tiny beige scorpions exit from the tree and stream off into the dense vegetation. As the oily smoke blackens the air and bleaches the sky, the scorpion horde streams past the empty skeleton of a protogyrenus, its archaic, bankrupt skull squirming with a nest of infant snakes inside it. Near the foot of the burning tree, their lime-green mother has wandered into the nest of hard-shelled eggs of a lizard named Weslothiana, an early amniote. and presently has her jaws wrapped around one of the eggs. When the mother lizard returns to her nest, she will find that it has been decimated by the snake. We leave the scene here, for the jungle darkens with the onset of night as the liquid sun melts behind the horsetails and spiky fronds of the club mosses, wasted and dying at the edge of the bleeding brown earth. Permian ruins. Burned out planetary flows, calcium junk heap boneyard, frozen sunsets, pink wasted seas with burnt out cores and vast effluxes of hydrogen sulfide, blank enamel skies wrapped around a dead globe, apocalyptic biology, spiky trees in bare salt flats sheared by wind-driven dust, clouds swept off the topsoils of the bare naked earth, valleys of broken rubble and desiccated desertified ruins, hollow cinder cones still smoking with lava matte floors of burning red earth. The horizons have learned the poetry of sulfur dioxide wastage, shattered green tiles of post-luminal microbial flats, their light gone dead, gray floods of acid rain runoff, flowing in granite runnels down to a pink and sunless sea, hydrogen sulfide suicide in a blown-out ocean littered with archaic wrecks of bloated bulbous sharks, squids, and fish. Valleys rimed in sedentary sandstone swirls now feature Gorgonopsian bones in states of rudimentary disarticulation. A single lone reptile resembling an immense alligator, Proterozoocus by his Latin name, nuzzles at the decaying meat near the edge of a drying jade-green pool. Beetles the size of walnuts with gold backs on them swarm over the meat. The sky has blackened with cinder cone ash above him for no accountable reason, and the earth beneath his feet is still hot. Nearby, stacks of Lystrosaurs, skulls, have been piled in a clutter beside the broken bleached remains of a conifer tree. A flood has swept through this granite canyon, depositing a thick, salty rime across the surface of every rock and left behind in its wake the stiffened, ruinous corpses of 1,000 dead reptiles. The ground here has been baked to a hot, dry crust riven by evaporite fissures and cracks in the bowl of the canyon. Swales of red granite hills have been littered with mud-dried clumps of scattered teeth, femurs, thigh bones, and rib cages of this doomed reptilian mammal world, jawbones that became ear bones. A single tree branch with a tiny dragonfly upon it, splattered with dried blood. Chips of broken sand-colored eggshells like teeth lie in huge detritic piles of stones, mud clumps, shattered, cloven trees, and dead animals, all piled into huge ramshackle hills upon the cracked red earth. He threw his mother's bones over his shoulders. The teeth of Cadmus in a sandstone ditch, lightning pops and rapid flashbulb arcs over the horizon where an enormous dust storm is gathering. The pale air has turned the color of vanilla coffee, and the lightning illuminates the rib cage of the storm from within, giving quick, ruinous glimpses of its internal dust-grain anatomy. In the sandstorms raging over a dune sea, a herd of bony, wasted Lystrosaurs have lost their way. They crest the rise of a deserted scrap heap hill and look around with the appearance of faint tetrapod ghosts. All animals of this Permian age now ending are of horizontal orientation only. Only the trees, conifers, cycads, glossopterids, are as yet vertical, for the animals have not learned the poetry of the vertical axis that the dinosaurs will soon master. These beasts are consigned to the fate of a shattered earth in a prehistoric salt bed Sodom and Gomorrah. Only the deep sulfur pits of hell mined by the cavernous dead know such despair, for the planet has become a thing of evil designed by Gnostic archons to condemn its cartilaginous and calcium-boned prisoners, who wander the plains with empty bellies and broken teeth, the mighty Gorgonopsian with its saber teeth, the first in the world, does not notice that it is drooling blood, but when it bites into the soft, muddy skull of a dead Lystrosaur, 3 of its teeth fall out, and its reptilian snuffling muzzle pulls away as it stops for a moment, puzzled, and looks up at the sky, where the erased ghost of a dead sun hangs. There is no sun now, but only a milky effigy. Bones are melting into rocks all over the planet. They have become essentially indistinguishable from the rocks, and take the opportunity of this apocalypse to return to their mineralogical mother. No Deucalion is present to throw the bones over his shoulder. The rocks, schist, granite, feldspar, limestone, and mica, have emerged the only victors in this magmatic desolation. Nothing swims in the seas, which feature no leviathans, and the land cannot furnish us with any such behemoths as we would wish to examine in cross-sectional analysis. The earth has shriveled up into a piece of mummified geology and molten magma, just as it was in the early Hadean days of its nascent cosmic awakening. Few beings, small desolate entities of an ontology that has become exclusively mineralogical, live upon its surface any longer, except such as wander nomadically forlorn and slattern ghosts of their former biological magnificence. Ruin and chaos now hold sway upon a beleaguered planet of purple skies and red death. Only the anoxic bacteria deep in the wasted coppery seas where nothing moves are happy. Dust storms and monstrous lightning strikes sweep over the planet with unimaginable fury. But lest we forget, there is that forlorn Proterozoocus, chewing bones by the lake, who will give rise to mightier beasts than his small reptilian brain can ever imagine. And there is also a single Thrinaxodon with whiskers, fangs, and fur that is presently, in spite of all, giving live birth to its young. The once mighty arthropods survive only as a few scattered crabs and roaches, and the vertebrate agon between mammals and reptiles has only seen its first act. The triple canopy of carbon dioxide, methane, and sulfur dioxide that has enclosed the Earth and transformed it into a gray mineralogical phantasm will remain as a gaseous planetary exoskeleton for some time to come. 13. Triassic cosmology. And here we go. When the Triassic recovers from the Permian catastrophe, it does so in the following ordered fashion, creating an immense canonical cosmogony in which the animals align themselves with a cosmic, perhaps planetary, order. The upper world of Triassic cosmology is inhabited by the sudden radiation and expansion of the pterosaurs, Eudimorphodon, Patinosaurus, Preondactylus. The bones of heaven radiate out, crossing the splayed infinite radii of the stars. At night these bones are illuminated. They light up the internal organs of the sky, cosmic beasts and giants pinned to the world's ceiling. In the orange and lavender sunlight, the heavens are traced by the flying arrowheads of the great beasts, Eagle of Zeus, Garuda, Horus, the falcon god. Morphology of the cosmic animal, the cracked blue dome of the heavens is his skull. There are no birds, yet only flying lizards, with razor-wire teeth and 3-foot wingspans, gathered on the rocks at foamy edges, milk-white sea roaring, sound inside a seashell, the croakings of leathery beasts, serrated beaks, mottled skulls, fish food. The Triassic underworld, gray-green swamps, murky copper lakes, enormous red and blue rivers, all full of monsters now. Sudden expansion of crocodilomorphs that slot themselves into the world's waters. Proterozoocus, Parazoocus, Rutiodon, huge heaving beasts with ancient jeweled eyes gazing out of aquatic depths. Floating, waiting, sepactly. Bumps on his back are mountains. Livid amber eyes like trapped suns buried in ancient leather flesh. Rows of archaic misaligned teeth. Egyptian myth, the swallower, Sobek. Cynodonts burrowing into the earth, these small furry creatures dig miniature caves and runnels, and they only come out at night. Reptile dogs, Cerberus, hounds of Yama. The flat disk of an ivory-enameled moon summons them forth. Bones of the earth, spinal axis of heaven, Jed pillar with a dead god inside. The Triassic midworld, flat gold-green disk of the earth, herbivorous grazing placerias, spiky armored Desmatozoocus, their predators, Postozoocus, a horizontal tyrannosaurus that has not yet learned to walk upright. It can, however, stand up on its hind legs. It is an enormous, terrifying beast. Sudden typogenic expansion of bipedal theropods, Eoraptor coelophysis, Styracosaurus, Herarosaurus. They erupt out of the ground and swarm with orange-striped bodies, lithe, fast-moving runner hunters. No bigger than a man, not an age yet of giants. The between world. View this cosmos in orthogonal cross-section, fine layers of cosmic strata, top layer, black sedimentary rock shot through with luminous stones, beneath that a layer of veined turquoise, then fine golden lemony yellow, a layer of smooth dirt-brown rock, and then orange glowing magma beneath. The lamp of the world tree was lit by stars. An eagle sat in the branches and a dragon gnawed at the roots. The earth was a tiny island of warm yellow candlelight shot through by cosmic radiations, intersecting beams and thin radiant lines from the outer worlds. A hearth fire burning in a forest of infinite darkness. The close of the age is marked, as so often, by catastrophe, with the breakup of Pangaea into two separate continents. Burnt umber lava flows, ruptured spine of the heavens, the world tree falling, pillars knocked loose, a 50-million-year-old animal, destroyed and gutted. The upper world staggers, implodes, then collapses. Blue chunks of sky raining fury upon the shattered brown earth, creatures reduced to mud effigies, the underworld heaving up through the thick mantle, shoving moist, slimy beings through. All three worlds topple into each other, collapse of spinal axial pivot, rotation gone bad, cosmic beasts descending into the horizons, sinking into the oceanic depths, plunging like phaeton. The strata in disarray, one layer puncturing up into another with another layer subducted beneath. Great newborn animals heaving and shifting out of the ground. The entire horizon is on fire. 14. Leviathan and Behemoth. Pangea. 4 separate continents now. Ragged roving islands where the animals which had been folded into the 3 worlds of Triassic cosmogony rupture and change their bones, splitting, twisting, and writhing with hexagonal metamorphoses. The salmon-pink sun, shoal of blue-gray pterosaurs inscribing Gaussian arcs into the smooth green skin of heaven, below the earth map folded and contoured, thin bones of vertical conifers, rayed, ferns, cycads, and ginkgos, foam spray shattering into minute glass beads at shore's edge, iridescent arcs of serrated sun, bird shadows scaling the lapis blue surface, now isolate in space 1 pterosaur, protoform Eudimorphodon. Splayed into X-ray temporal biogeomap, 3-foot wingspan, ragged teeth, short neck, long tail, ivory bones working beneath translucent skin. Now move across time, end form, 20-foot wingspan, no teeth, elongated neck, no tail, Cretaceous pteranodon, a living flying fish spear, enormous. Engine of fish death, perfection of the idea complete. Yeah, that is amazing. In the waters below, behold the beast. Yellow-green sea depths with fan arcs of sunbeams glittering. It sails darkly into view, massive bulk like a mountain with paddle fins and a tree trunk tail, the flat wedge of its skull illuminated with a pair of incandescent amber eyes that peer out from the sides of an impossibly ancient and archaic skull. Behold, as it rises vertically from the blue depths to engulf a pterodactyl that has lost its way, implosion like an air balloon that has just been shot with a chrome bullet, leathery wings dying, fanning as the teeth of Liopleurodon disarticulate its avian morphology with a pair of jaws the biggest the marine depths have ever seen. Leviathan. Now observe the vectors. Eoraptor hatched from mottled pink eggs. A Triassic protoform tearing its way through the ferns with needle teeth, walk on 2 legs, lithe and rapid stride, serpentine eyes, polished like jade. Follow the animal footsteps over the eons, and its skeleton glows with internal luminescence, bones shifting and torquing, Riemannian manifolds and Gaussian curvature guiding the hexagonal calcium cells into the body of an Allosaurus. Skull like a battering ram, with tombstone teeth and small 3-fingered claws, sinews, cartilage, collagen thews, powering piston-driven legs, a bio-siege engine for hurling itself against the Stegosaurus. The Stegosaurs were bipedal too at first. Protoform tiny Scutellosaurus on 2 legs with small raised bumps on its back and bird-like beak. Grown beyond the eons, with a chassis shifted forward to crawl on 4 legs, tectonic plates rising from its back in glowing crimson rows, and spikes from its tail. A living fortress, designed to impede the Allosaurus battering ram, a mobile, moving ballistical force of teeth and claws to be met with inertial torpor of the stegosaur, eating its leaves in dreamlike slumberous trance until the agonies of its ruptured belly split open like a rotten melon, and it lay dying as the teeth became festooned with chunks of pink meat, blood arcing into clouds across the grassless earth. Yeah, that is awesome. I just told the AI to show me an image during the Jurassic of an Allosaurus attacking a Stegosaurus. And look at that. Nailed it. Perfect. Couldn't ask for a better image. If you hired an expensive artist to illustrate, the images would be no better. And the sauropods were bipedal too. tiny Saturnalia that became herbivorous, its neck lengthened, and as Plateosaurus, it stood up and down to eat the leaves from the trees. As the vertebrae gave birth to bone chains that stalked to the massive neck of the brachiosaur raised above the forest canopy to chew the leaves, where its muddy eyes were soaked in the lime-green sun that lay perched in the foliage, warm and slender, raw and nourishing, lignin and crunchy cells as it walked, behemoth, a living mountain whom none could touch, pterosaurs the size of bats nested on its back, and it crushed the trees as it moved. Yeah, that's the end of the show. And it was a great one. Thank you, dinosaurs. Exit stage left, so bring in the mammals. 15. Cretaceous flood. Teal turquoise twilight, maroon magenta clouds, the sky raining showers of glowing embers, the sun an arc welder's torch, the earth now an arc. Its beams span the azimuth of horizontal decay, cosmic ribcage. From up here the land is being erased. Tsunami fire mud cage as the trees are eclipsed with foam. A pair of Quetzalcoatluses, wings searing, diving for the spume, dead burnt gold sun brown around the edges. Clouds burning micrometeorite chaos. White arcs of foam spray fanning out over the land. A herd of yellow hadrosaurs swept away huge redwood logs filigreed with soft green patina. Rolling, slamming, breaking bones of a tyrannosaurus that lies prostrate on the flood, dazed, unbelieving. Massive mud runnels, earthen barrows torn up, floating, cracked bones, the dried-out, tumbling carcass of an ankylosaur, spikes broken, an enormous sea ark the planet has turned into, birds with blue and red feathers hopping from branches in flames. The skull of a protoceratops goes floating past, ridden by 5 terrified eomaya, furry mammals, wet, soaked pelts, Noachian flood, the sky gone liquid, chunks burning, glowing, gleaming, falling. At the bend of the earth, water is pouring off into space. Dead green velociraptors, eyes gone filmy gray, staring at nothing. The sagging, rotten rib cage of a sauropod, meat streaming from it in pink ribbons, shells of dead animals, bobbing, hordes of blue-green ammonites floating in the wreckage like tires with dead squids hanging out of them. Adam Cadmon. In the beginning was the bone. A colossal mosasaurus, fins flapping, biological temple made out of blue cells, chipped teeth that will never eat another ammonite. Glossy black sheets of water, foaming in rivulets, swirls and eddies, pools of vermiform chaos, water with oily lakes of iridescent blood, veinous streams and rivers of quartz, feldspar, and yellow sandstone, broken chunks, black sky mother chaos churning pieces of heaven broken open off, tiny green ornithischians floating bulbous and bloated, swollen beyond all recognition, the shredded skull of a mosasaur, streams of yellow bile and green juices, once biologic, now fermenting, 3 tangled baby tyrannosaurs, the accordion corpse of a purple Quetzalcoatlus, its beak broken off, 4 tiny mammals with hollow eye sockets and burnt fur, black rain, Deucalion, Monomatia, enormous leviathan full of birds' eggs, swirls, eddies, and currents of foam, brackish rack and bitter water, salt spray and decay, bales of broken branches coated gray with ash. A single lone eyeball goes floating past, detached from some skull. The water is full of teeth, incandescent sparks raining down all around, fallen stars. And now here comes the tsunami. Huge redwood cylinders, rolling logs of ruin, leathery blackened wings, broken skulls, an altar built to chaos and the angel of death descending scythe-winged, biological Dresden, morphological Hamburg, burning. Giant ants still crawling on wet tree stumps, the cracked and bleeding horn of a triceratops carried by the currents. On the white metal horizon the earth splits like a bone and gives way. Gray-blue canvas of the planet washed clean, wilted petals of a frayed marigold, drifting runnels and cavities open into the ground, fathomless voids, abysses without bottom, earthworm declivities and spidery cracks ramifying, fern trees and horsetails washed away, depletion, a chrome sky and negative silvery burn, stunted, tree fields of decapitated heads, snakes writhing, pink and green, emerald bodies, skin seared and blistered, split like old melon rinds, 3 dead birds carried along the effluvia, wreckage, sea spawn, sea waste, eggshells, brown chips with hexagonal filigree, teeth, you the great. at the visible carbonate sky, green glowing edges, chips of mica, burning, laminate rivers, pink feldspar, bird's nests soaked, 3 termite mounds crumbling, mud-washed spleen, fury of the heavens upon the earth, God's wrath, fading out, earth memory, burnt horizon, azure ruins, splintered bones, trees like crucifixes, the mud-bent sewage of a death-racked horizon bent over the edge and toppling, dropping off mud loads like excrement, into the black wastes of space, corpses hanging from trees, 3 flaming birds gathered around, hopping, a stiffened lizard dying, the broken tooth of a tyrannosaur floating, bobbing, mud, foam, silence, all canopies, gone. Part 4. Anthropogeny. Eocene lake bed. A few chocolate pools of muddy water are all that remain, their surfaces lightly tapped by drops of rain from a leaky sky that dissolve quietly into the small brown pools framed by chips of cracked earth. Here, half submerged in the mud, lies the forlorn wreck of an ambulocetus skeleton, whale protoform, marine bones splayed with age and dried in the sun to a fine ivory patina. The clouds shuffle and stir to expose part of the ragged sky, which allows an archaic sunbeam through to wash a piece of the forest in gold light, making the dark leaves burn with some hidden green fire. From out of the copse, a wretched propaleotherium wanders by to drink from one of the pools, dipping its head cautiously toward the water, ears fluttering for signs of ambush. It is the horse protoform, no larger than a cat, drinking coppery water near the caved-in skull of the first whale, a creature that once walked on all fours and made its home in the lake when it was full of murky aqua-green water and it lay in wait for such prey. The horse pauses a moment to raise its head, looking about as the clouds move over the sun and draw charcoal shadows across the chalky white rime of the lake bottom. Then it moves along and disappears back into the trees, which quietly swallow it. Inside those green leafy depths, the sounds of monkey-like chattering can be heard. Another protoform, Gardenosia, one of the first primates, swarming through the trees, alive with the novelty of existence, but as yet unaware of their promising future as masters of the horse and hunters of Leviathan. And here they are, Ambulocetus, Propaleotherium, and Gardenosia, setting the stage for the great mammalian epoch. 17. Oligocene gigantomachy. Sheets of ice foam crept over Antarctica. The earth shrank and the land shriveled and dried into leathery deserts scarred by pink ribbons of water that carried mud and silt and bands of mirrored gold. Colossal mountains shoved up from the ground as India heaved against the Asian plate, and everywhere the great forests withdrew to leave the earth coated in yellow bands of savanna spiked with bare trees and lean branches that formed arterial veins against the matte blue skies. Enormous mammals fed upon these grasses in the desiccated valley of a red canyon where ancient oceans once scooped out walls of rock. A massive gray Indricotherium chews the remaining leaves from a dying tree, a proto-rhinoceros, 20 feet tall, with legs like columns, but no horns. Urda's largest land mammal ever. When its legs moved, all other animals fled from its path. Look at those monstrosities. That is a wow. A total wow. The mammals strike back. Nearby, 3 huge Calicotherium are stripping the leaves from a Zelkova tree with their prehensile front paws, strange sloth-like creatures with sun-colored fur and horses' heads that sit back on their haunches like gorillas as they chew their leaves. A pair of entelodonts surface into view at canyon's edge, giant pigs with 3-foot-long jaws bearing carnivorous fangs, and double-hoofed feet designed for catching prey. They pause a moment on their spindly legs, surveying the creatures of the canyon, then descend into it, kicking up dust clouds that shroud their advance. In the ocean deeps, meanwhile, a 60-foot-long shark called Megalodon dwelled. its open jaws full of 6-inch long teeth that could swallow a dolphin whole. Proto-great white, Erda's gigantopithec shark. And in the late Miocene of Argentina, an enormous bird drops from the heavens to settle upon a burnt field, strewn with the rubble of animal carcasses, bones in tangled pink disarray forming white calcium stripes against dark earth, brown. The bird is Argentavis, and its wings when spread were 25 feet across, large enough to pick up a man like the rock that carried Sinbad. It strode forward to the carrion on huge red reptilian legs, hopping as it squawked beneath the burnished bronze sun. Back in the Paleocene, Erda had summoned forth from her Stygian depths a biologic typhon, the largest snake ever created, 45-foot-long titanoboa. It hunted the boggy swamps for crocodiles and could have swallowed a man whole. These are the monsters. This is the time of the Earth's gigantomachy, when mythic beasts were made, not out of shining words, but cellular lattices and morphological poetry, of bone and sinew, cartilage and blood, dreamed forth into shambling, screaming, rumbling forms that collided with each other in a perpetual war of endless zoologic fury over the Earth's burnt saffron savannas. All right, that's where I'm going to stop for the reading here. That's about 3/4 of the book. I'll leave the rest of the anthropology for those of you who are interested and are interested in purchasing this book in hardcover with full color resolution, $49.99 on Amazon. Should be up in a few days. Give it till Wednesday. I still have to finish dot a few I's and cross a few T's here. The page number is letter A, so I have to go and fix that. I noticed some punctuation mistakes and so forth. So that'll be that. And then look for it on Amazon. And I also still do astrological readings for those of you who are interested in those. They're very illuminating, I promise. Haven't had one disappointed client yet. Hit me up at johndavidebert@gmail.com.